Right, welcome along to my session. You need to put headphones on if you don't already, unless you're sat really close, and then you might be able to hear me. But otherwise, keep those headphones on. My name's Jason Foster. I'm the founder and chief executive at Cynozure. I'm a data, business, technology, digital, AI strategist by trade. I'm also the author of the book Data Means Business. And I was saying to this gentleman just now that maybe this has drawn a crowd because of the word AI in the title, but then I realized, no, probably every session has that, but it's more likely the word boardroom. And what I tend to do in these sorts of sessions, what's quite a tech conference, is try and lift above technology and think about how do we make a difference, how do we make a change, how do we drive the agenda in organizations, and hopefully this session will help with that today. On your seat, you have a little card here. These are for your takeaways. So hopefully I deliver some value. One thing at least, hopefully, that you can take back to the office with you. Note down what you've learned, and if you bring that to our stand, we have some Tony's chocolate, which is probably some of the best chocolate around for you, and we'll trade it. So take some notes, hope you learn something, and hope you get some chocolate off the back of it. Cynozure are a data analytics and AI strategy company. We essentially help organizations find the ways of getting value by applying data and analytics and AI to their organizations. We support organizations achieve the potential that's possible by using those things, but it's all about how do we apply and how do we generate business value and business outcomes from these things. We do that across all sorts of services, from helping to think, helping to execute, helping to deliver, helping to transform, helping to drive change across the whole value chain of data, from data management through to AI and analytics, through to culture, through to literacy, change, the things that you need to do to drive success with data and analytics in your organization. Now, we do that for lots of different brands across the globe in all sectors, so public, private, and the not-for-profit sector. And what's really interesting that we find is that the challenges, the problems, the opportunities, the aspirations are actually quite similar at a very macro level, particularly in the boardroom, across these different sectors. And we try and distill that into some things that can be clear and understood about how people drive the agenda forward in their organization. I mentioned I also wrote the book Data Means Business. This was about distilling how do you really drive value in an organization. I co-authored this with Barry Green, who's been a chief data officer at organizations like Allianz and Bank of Ireland. And we wrote this book to try and make this really consumable for boards, leadership teams, broad enough for a business audience, but deep enough for a data professional audience as well. So I hope you find that book useful if you land on it. So, show of hands, who's heard of AI? Not everyone, how, wow. My kids have heard of AI. They're kind of like, yeah, Snapchat, AI, maths homework, AI. My mum asks me if I heard of AI. She WhatsApps me, have you heard of this thing called AI? Boards have heard of AI. And when I say boards, I mean in the broadest sense. That might be executive committee, that might be the board, that might be your leadership team, but the senior audience in your organization. Now what this shows, it's by an organization that runs a series called CEO Insights. They look at earnings calls. This is US data, but they look at earnings calls, and this tracks how often keywords are mentioned in those earnings calls, and it tracks it quarter by quarter and how much that changes over time. And they make it easy for us to kind of have a look at what those keywords are. So in this top right, this is last quarter's data, we see AI in this top right corner, which means it's big and it's growing importance in terms of how it's being mentioned and how many people are talking about it. We also see things like LLMs, which are small and growing in importance. We've got IoT, and if we compare that to things like recession, which are now small and fading in importance, CEOs really care about this. They've woken up to this and they're talking about it. Whether they can execute against it, let's explore that as we move through the session. Another way of looking at that is the share of companies that mentioned AI in these earnings calls, which has gone from 10% back in 2019 to, what's that, nearly 40% last quarter. So CEOs care about this. They're talking about it very publicly. They're talking about it very privately, internally as well. But it's a topic that has hit the boardroom. And it's a topic that's driving an agenda quite differently from how the topic of data, topic of analytics, the topic of insights has hit the boardroom in recent years. Data crew, there is some data to tell you. So this is a Gartner, this one's a Gartner graph. 82% of CEOs believe that they can get more than 10% productivity gain, 10% productivity gain from generative AI. So that's these last 3 bars. Huge, huge opportunity that CEOs see. 87% of CEOs agree that the benefits of AI outweigh the risks, and I'm going to talk a bit more about that. 86% of CEOs believe that this year and next, AI will at least help them maintain their revenue, but also grow. And I think that's quite significant, that there's an excitement, there's an appetite at the, essentially at the boardroom, because the CEOs are showing interest. So what does that all mean for us lot in the kind of data world? So first we have to figure out what do boards actually care about. And as I said, when I say boards, that might be a leadership team, that might be your exec, just the kind of the senior audience. They tend to care about these 5 things. Most of the things they think about and talk about and interact with fall under here. So they care, of course, about the strategic direction of the organization. Where's it going? What's our vision? Are we achieving it? Are we investing in the right things that help us do that? Have we got the right objectives that help us meet what we're trying to achieve? We care about money, financial oversight. Have we got good control? Are we in control of our costs? Are we sound? Have we got good cash flow? Is our balance sheet looking good? Are we returning to our investors? They care about the financial health, the financial viability, and have financial oversight of the organization. Sometimes that's regulated, depending on the business you're in. They care about corporate governance. How do we look after our organization so that we maintain what we want to achieve, that we drive the agenda that we want to drive forward, either at pace or carefully, whatever the sort of culture of the organization is. They care about executive leadership. So do we have the skills, the capabilities, the knowledge, the know-how, the team that allows us to drive the agenda for these other 3 things? And sometimes that means changing CEOs, sometimes it means moving the team around, and I'm sure you've all been impacted by those changes and those shuffles that happen in the boardroom. And really importantly, it's sort of my favorite one that they care about is stakeholders. So customers, employees, partners, suppliers. They care deeply about the impact of the things that they do, what they have on their stakeholders. So when we look at AI through this lens, we need to make sure that boards understand how AI will impact on their ability to manage, maintain, oversee, look after the things that we see on the board here. So I'm going to talk about 5 ways that AI has confused the boardroom, because in some ways I showed a graph that CEOs are talking very publicly about AI. That's one story. And then privately in organizations, what does that really mean? And I think there's a really strong opportunity for data professionals, from CDOs to engineers to architects to change agents that are inside organizations, to really own, drive, and influence and impact this agenda, bottom up and top down. So the first challenge actually that we see, so we talk to lots of leadership teams, boards, they bring us in to talk to them about AI, and one of the things that they're most confused about, and I use the word confused a little bit kind of like clickbaity, but it's lack of clarity, it's don't really understand, so it's kind of like top level, but is the impact. And one of the things that we find is that there is a big mismatch of understanding about the impact. I was talking yesterday to one of our customers, and they were talking about some comments the group CEO was making about AI in their organization. And the group CEO said that AI will have the same, this is in a car manufacturing company, that AI will have the same impact to customer service that robotics had to manufacturing cars. So if we think about what robotics did to manufacturing cars, when it first was released, it sort of reduced the headcount by about 50%. Now, you used to run a plant with about 10,000 people, now you run it with 1,000 to 2,000 people. So in his head, he thinks the impact of AI is going to have that significant impact on how they do customer service. Another meeting we were at with a different organization in retail, the CEO in the room was saying, this will transform one of our business lines. I want to rewrite how we do this business line, and I want to rewrite it with the lens of AI. How do I use AI to change what we do, how we do it, and drive success in this business line? The other side of the same table was another lady who ran, she happened to be in the HR function. She was like, can't see where we will apply this. Can't see it will impact. We might be able to apply it a little bit. Some of the HR tools she was talking to were talking about vendors she was talking to, were talking about AI in their product. She's like, yeah, cool, maybe. So in one room, completely different understanding of the impact that AI will have on their business and where it can be applied. The other sort of space where impact is slightly misunderstood is the impact on the industry. So if I'm in manufacturing, if I'm in retail, if I'm in charity sector, what's the impact that AI will have on our sector as a whole? Now, for some sectors, that's existential. That's existential. That is big changes. So if anyone knows the actor and film producer Terry Perry, he was going to invest something in the region of $800 million, nearly $1 billion, on growing and scaling his film studios. The day before he was about to basically pull the trigger on that and start making investment there, Sora was released. And he saw the potential that Sora had to change how they make films, how films are produced, how actors are brought into films. And he stood down his £800 million investment. He didn't make that investment in growing the film industry in the way that he was going to, because he saw this potential. That's existential in terms of that sector. We've seen in the US, lots of kind of people campaigning against the use of AI in some of these sectors. There's some really big challenge at a sector level. Some sectors, I go to see a physiotherapy because I'm old and my back hurts all the time. There's no chance that AI will impact on their ability to work and fix and mold and manipulate and click. It's lovely, by the way, you should do that. No way. Maybe bookings, yeah, maybe the way they interact with customers, personalized offers, yeah, sure. But in terms of the craft, that ain't being hit by AI. So big impact in some industries, small impact in others. And frankly, lots of boardrooms don't know which camp they sit in. And they're a bit worried to hear the answer that it might be the existential one, because that's a big transformational change. But the ones that think about it really do need to drive the agenda forward. I suppose the other thing about impact is there's a bit of FOMO. So CEO watching their buddy, CEO over the room or the WhatsApp group they're on, talking about this amazing thing that they're going to do. They've listened to the earnings call and heard that they're talking about AI. There's a bit of kind of like, oh, I think we need to do something. I think we need to do something. I don't know what that thing is. So there's a big impact in terms of the conversation. There's a big impact in terms of how it can impact the company. And I think as data professionals, we have the opportunity to think about AI through the lens of how it impacts. And whilst you walk around the show floor and lots of sort of quality technology that can apply all sorts of solutions, technology is one thing here. Data is only one thing here actually as well. The impact that it's going to have is what boards care about. Understanding the impact that it can have. And I think this room has a really good opportunity to talk to their leadership teams, help their leaderships to understand that impact. Understand the use cases, understand the objectives, understand where the challenges that they're looking to achieve. Forget AI for a minute. This is just about business problems and where we're trying to go. What is our strategy and how do we get there? Then we can think about how can we apply AI. We can even think about should we apply AI, because it's not the right solution for all the problems. But at least if we know what the problems are, at least if we know what the use cases are, at least if we know what operational challenges they're having in supply chain, we can go, right, there's a problem here which we can consider for AI. And without that, the board are confused. Without knowing where they go, what direction they take in terms of what they try and focus on, there's no chance. Now the other way, and lots of people talk about make it about outcomes, but the other way to think about it is AI, certainly generative AI, it does allow you to innovate. It does allow you to think about things that you haven't before. And thinking about it, where could we apply AI to, is actually quite practical and pragmatic thing to do. It does new things, so I need to think about my business differently. So yes, focus on use cases, yes, focus on outcomes, but actually what we want to do is also consider how could I plug this in, but it's got to be connected to what the board care about. The second thing that there's a bit of lack of clarity about is leadership. Who should do this? Who should do this? Because in one hand, you go, okay, maybe if you've got a chief data officer, the chief data officer should use this. They've always looked after almost traditional AI, personalization models, machine learning algorithms. Yeah, that makes sense. Maybe the chief data officer should look after this. But generative AI, it's technology, doesn't really necessarily sit through a data lens in terms of what data people look after. Maybe generative AI as an application should sit with technology, should sit with the CTO, should sit with the CIO. Maybe it should sit with digital, because actually if you think about some of the sort of prompt engineering type tools, the co-pilot type tools that exist out there, actually the way you get value is by embedding them in business processes and people interacting with them. Well, maybe that should sit with some kind of digital team, some kind of customer experience team that are looking at how do we drive interaction with customers. So there's lots of questions about where this should sit. The other thing actually is if you think about this room, the floor, lots of them now say our product, it's a data management tool powered by AI. Who cares? Do we care? Like why do we care? We don't say data management tool powered by Java, data management tool powered by C++. So why do we care that it's powered by AI? Okay, maybe we do because there's some new functionality in there. But if you think about the boardroom and you've got Salesforce walking into the marketing department saying, AI, it's all AI, and they do just say that, it's all about AI. They're going to think, well, is this part of our strategy? When we think about AI, do we really, is it what the vendors are saying? Is it what we should be doing? So there's a real question about where that should sit. So the board care about leadership. They care about who this should be. And either it's going to be decided top down, someone's going to say, it's this person, you're in charge, make it happen. Or what's happening a lot is a bit of inertia, not really sure what to do, where to go, and you kind of get different people, different departments picking this up. You've got the digital function going, yeah, it's got to be done, it's AI, it's the future. You've got the chief data officer saying, yeah, I'm going to own this because, yeah, it's AI, so I've always looked after AI, it should be me. You've got functions going out and buying new tools that have AI embedded in them. It just happens, and then no one owns it. So how we can change this is to start thinking about where's it most practical for this to sit. Who's most likely to be able to drive the agenda? Who's most likely to be able to help the organization pivot and change and adjust and become the kind of company that we want to be by applying AI? We need to think about approach short term. So who should come up with the plan? Who should own the strategy? And then there's kind of, once we've got that going, there's normally some transformation required. That could shift. So a single person might be the answer. Moving it over time might be the answer. But boards care. They care about, as I said at the start, executive leadership, and this needs executive leadership. So we need to think about where this should sit. I suppose the other big thing is actually about skills. So while CEOs are out talking about AI, they're on earnings calls saying it's all about AI. Not necessarily at that leadership level do those skills exist in terms of understanding. I mean, we're all here walking around trying to get our heads around this AI thing, going to different talks, different speeches. We're trying to work it out. We're the data people. So imagine how the board are sat there where they're reading in The Economist about AI, and I'll talk a minute about some of the risks. It's really hard for people to understand, so expecting people to have those capabilities is quite hard, but at a leadership level, that needs to exist. And the other side of leadership that's really important is around culture. So the industry talks about data culture, starting to talk about AI culture. I was at a client the other day, they're talking about digital culture. There's a kind of triangle of these things where actually this is about having a business culture that allows you to better make use of this stuff, better use data, better use insights, better use AI to drive a better performance for the organization. But culture, yes, comes bottom up, but it needs to be driven and directed at a leadership level. Boards care about this. They care about the impact that this will have. And AI actually has a danger, I'll talk about risks in a minute, of sort of adjusting the culture by mistake, of it being used in places that don't meet, or being used in ways that don't meet the sort of cultural values of the organization. So the boards need to think about this, and I think, again, it's a real opportunity to step back and go, how do we create the culture that we need? That a little bit comes down to skills, comes down to communication, comes down to doing things, comes around to talking about it. We need to think about that. We need to do something about that. How am I doing for time? Oh, good, we're perfect. So I talked about impact, and the biggest thing we need to think about to get AI right is the value that it will create. We talked about that, use cases, strategic objectives, how we deliver the organization, how we move them forward, and where AI can play a part. So the opportunity side of this, I've mentioned, and it's the thing that will get people interested and motivated. Interested and motivated. Because people like to go for the good stuff. Actually, quite a lot of people are motivated, and individually people are motivated by pain avoidance, but opportunity is often about pain avoidance. But opportunity is really important, impact is really important, and the value that we try and create is really important. But, big but, and the thing that's causing confusion is the risks. So AI has potential to be impactful, as I've talked about, but AI also has the impact, the risk of causing more risk, the risk of creating issues. And boards are really, really worried about this. They're worried about privacy, they're worried about cybersecurity, they're worried about pissing off customers, they're worried about rogue AI, telling customers things that they shouldn't be telling them, they're worried about IP infringement, they're worried about where this goes, what happens to our workforce. They're worried about a lot of stuff, and worry tends to overtake excitement. So confusion comes from worry, and a lot of the risks that we see, that's a lot of what's being talked about in the boardroom. There are a couple of examples here. I tried to find some that probably no one would know about actually, but I'm sure most people have seen all of these. But just a few examples, and this is the stuff that makes it into the press, by the way. You don't really see much in the kind of BBC or the mainstream news that says, look at this brilliant thing that someone did with AI. Maybe in sort of healthcare and when cancer's detected or something like that, but just day-to-day stuff isn't really mentioned. But this top left one is Air Canada's chatbot. Thank you. I thought you were clapping at me then, that was really random. Air Canada's chatbot that offered refunds to people for some flights that broke their pricing and refund policy. So and then went through a whole challenge of working out whether they should really be refunding those. They argued that they weren't responsible. It was the chatbot's problem. Chatbot did it. It wasn't us, Gov, honest. But they had to then refund people and honour the refunds that they gave. In some ways, that's no different from a human. Like I remember a few years back, I can't remember which retailer it was, put on a whole load of TVs during sale for £1 instead of £1,000, and they had to honour the price. It's sort of a bit similar, but that's it. When a human does, the bar's quite high for AI. Board the bar is up here. Humans, it's sort of, you try and make it up there, but you accept a bit of oh, he screwed up. So Air Canada, big problem. People know about that. The airline industry knows about that. They're all worried about that. DPD, everyone see this one? This is DPD's chatbot. Someone basically tried to game it. They tried to break DPD's chatbot. They asked it to exaggerate how terrible DPD are. And at first it said, no, I can't do that. And it kept asking. And eventually it said, DPD's own chatbot said DPD's the worst delivery company. It also got it to swear, and swearing isn't in the policy. So people have gamed the chatbot. They're going to try and do this. And then the one that's actually very sad, really upsets me, is a eating disorder charity. They rolled out a chatbot to try and interact and deal with the volume of calls that they're getting into their call center, and the chatbot was giving harmful advice. It was advocating for the thing that their callers were calling in to try and get advice on, which a human just wouldn't do, but the AI did, and they actually pulled it within 24 hours. Really harmful stuff, right? Harmful to individuals, horrible. Harmful to customers and interactions and brand. Harmful to costs and pricing and the challenge that brings. So the impact of the risks are huge, and they impact customers, they impact shareholders, they impact employees, they impact the community that sort of interacts with an organization. And it has the potential to impact those 5 things I mentioned that boards really care about. And the biggest impact for me is about brand damage. So all of those things will damage the brand of all of those organizations. And people will get over that maybe, but actually if we keep doing this and it keeps being the headline news, this is really impactful to brands. I haven't talked about regulation, but that's about managing risk. So there's a lot of regulatory control. Boards care about regulation. It's all about governance. I haven't talked about costs, so there's a big cost side here. We talk about data as an asset. On the balance sheet, where you've got assets, you need to balance it with a liability. AI is the liability, I think. Data is the liability. It can be the liability at all. So we need to worry about that. So the things that we can do as individuals in organizations is to understand these risks. Not all of those things will be relevant to all organizations, but we need to understand that. We need to have some good risk management, excuse me, that allows us to more effectively know what the risks are and put the mitigations in place. So if bias is a problem, it's a risk actually, bias in algorithms is a risk, and giving incorrect or harmful results, then we need to know about that, and we need to put something in place that stops us from allowing bias to creep into our models. So knowing the risks allows us to do something about it. This one's quite simple, and this has been similar actually, just in terms of data as well, not even AI, is boards don't know what to do next. And that really upsets them, and it confuses them, and it gives them nerves. And because they know there's big opportunity, because they've seen it and they've heard about it in other organizations, they want to know what the right direction should be. Should we go here first? Should we buy some technology? Should we try it first? Should we build our governance model? Should we educate the organization on what AI is about? Should we put the culture in? Like, I don't know, like, you know, mind blown in terms of different options that you could take. And when there's lack of direction, there's no decision. Budgets don't get approved, strategy doesn't get impacted, costs don't get spent, investments don't get made. And there's a real obligation, I think, to make sure that we start thinking about, we have to embrace AI. Like, not embracing AI is like, you can't do that. We have to just assume, and even if embracing AI means jumping in and saying, actually, we're not going to do anything, that's fine. Like, deciding you're not going to do anything is totally fine, but embracing it and making that conscious choice about what do we do, where do we go, what order do we do it in, and having a clear plan, at least for 6, 9, 12 months, that allow you to build on the organization and have impact as quick as possible. Now, I saved the best till last. I don't even need to say much other than the title. Actually, some organizations don't know what AI is really. They've heard about it, they kind of get it. You know, it's mentioned, it's a phrase, so it's in the public domain. I said my kids talk about it, so it's mentioned. But really, do we know what it is? Really, do we know what it can do? Really, do we understand how it will impact the organization? Another board meeting I was in, this was only recently, they'd never heard of ChatGPT. Who hasn't heard of ChatGPT? This is a board member of an organization, a significant global organization, they hadn't heard of ChatGPT. So they don't know what it is necessarily. Well, certainly they hadn't heard of it in context of AI, because you might not really know it's AI if you're just consuming something like ChatGPT. So that lack of understanding and lack of education means that all the other stuff I've talked about is a no-go. You can't really have that discussion because there's a lack of clarity of what it is. So we need to find ways of talking to very smart people, by the way, like boards and execs and leadership teams are very smart people normally, not everyone, I'm sure. I'm sure you've got examples of where they're not, but they tend to be, you know, savvy enough to kind of get it. So we have to explain in a way that they understand and can consume it in their language, linked to what they care about and what they're trying to achieve. So we need to know the impact on the strategic direction, costs, the business, the people, the workforce, the culture. We need to educate boards in what that all means. So ultimately, removing the confusion and this lack of clarity is all about understanding why we should do it and how we should do it. And if we can help boards and leadership teams to understand that, we can make better impact and we can help organizations really make some progress with AI. So I hope that was useful, and thank you for listening.